Hello, this is Don Victor, author of Drawn to Win, host of the podcast Drawn to Win, the director of the Academy of Composition, and the creator of the Core 80 Experience, also known as the See and Grow Rich in Art video course, which you can find out more information at core80.com. This is the Drawn to Win podcast, where I have the incredible privilege to draw artists from around the world into fun and meaningful conversations around art and life, and yes, maybe even a little food. You can hear us each week on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so you always have a seat among friends. Let's get into the show.
Well, when I read about your personal past and being a foster child and whatnot, I just thought it was interesting because I started my life as a baby who was fostered.
Really?
And yes. And put it this way. I was given up shortly after birth by my biological mother and was in an orphanage for, I think, till I was 4 months old or something like that. And then I always thought I was adopted at that age, but in later years, I found out by reading adoption papers and such that I was actually in foster care until but with the same family until I think I was about 3 or 4 years old when I was officially adopted. And anyway, just that brings a whole element and just personal, element and history into it. I've since been at the let's see, do I reveal my age? Why not? Because I'm proud of it. When I was 52, and I'm 65 now, I was reunited with my birth family. And
Really?
a very positive, interesting journey, positive experience. Something that I never thought that I ever really needed to do, but apparently I did. But anyway, that's a story we could talk for an hour and 20 minutes about. So I don't want to get too sidetracked on that because, it's a large part of what makes of who I am and what makes me who I am. But
well, I think it's an extremely important part because when you are in that type of position, right, in life, and there's that void, a void that should not be there, right? It should give you root.
Right.
Family should give you roots. But when it doesn't, it creates a void.
Yeah.
And that void is a question. And so you're always looking, you're always comparing, you're always contrasting. And I think that's part of what a great artist does is they're always seeking into the invisible, into the unknown, and trying to find understanding of why me, why this, why that. And if you approach it from a healthy perspective, not a malice perspective, I think you find incredible amounts of beauty in life.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm very blessed because I had, but I feel like I've always had a healthy perspective on it. I've known ever since I can remember that I was adopted, and just always felt like I was where I was meant to be. And the interesting part of it was that I really, although there was always this element of wondering, there's a mystery. You see someone who you meet someone, you kind of, something resonates and you think, maybe we're related, or, that kind of thing. But, when you consider that I went through the bulk of my life without ever really searching, and then there's a whole story as to why I did search, sort of put my information out there. But it turned out that my birth mother had been looking for me, searching for me for over 30 years.
Wow. How did that make you feel?
Oh, God. Wow. I always felt, I consider myself to be a caring person. I think if I want to be helpful to other people, that's a big part of who I am. I started out in in another career. I was a speech pathologist. I worked with children. I mean, just, that's a big part of who I am. I consider myself to be very caring. But what blew me away was that when I found that out, that that she really needed the healing, and she needed this. And I had never thought of that for 52 years, that, geez, maybe my birth mother who gave me up, maybe she, is in need of something, that it's not all about me.
Yeah.
I think as adoptees, a lot of the time we're all about, well, no, I mean, I certainly was never woe is me, but, but a lot are. And, and you think, you're the victim, you're the one who's been abandoned, and you have been, yes, true. But just being who I am, the fact that I never really, that was my focus, was I was the one who was abandoned. I was the adoptee, and I wonder if my mother ever thinks about me. Every year my birthday would come. I wonder if she remembers that today's the day I was born, stuff like that, which I'm sure you can relate to.
Absolutely.
And then to find out that she had been searching for me all that time. And it's like, oh my gosh, how could I never think that maybe, why wasn't I ever thinking about her? Why was I so self-consumed in that, in my thoughts about being adopted? It was a big eye-opener and a big lesson,
Wow.
big milestone kind of for me personally.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It's I know I talked with somebody once in one of the podcasts about an incident that happened when I was younger, and which almost led me to die. I was about 3 years old, I guess. And I was the victim of this issue, and yet today, the person who hurt me, I long to see them again so I could hug them, because I forgave them when I was probably about 11 or 12, but I never got to they never heard it from me. And so sometimes I speak it into the ether and I vibe it out. But when I hear about the person, they've gone schizophrenic, they've wandered the streets, they've been in and out of prison because of the guilt that they carry all these years later. And if he just understood that he's loved and he's forgiven, and it breaks my heart that he could not receive that gift, 20 or 30 years ago, but it's so I it's strange when you take back the power and decide that you're not the victim, but in this process you can actually extend grace and healing. And it's interesting, in the Greeks, 2,000 years ago, they created a system called the Enneagram. And the Enneagrams are these 9 personality types, and you are absolutely a number 2, which is a helper. And I'm a number 2. And it's like we help people because in helping people, we get love, right? And so we're very, very caring. Sometimes we give so much that people kind of expect it, and then we kind of get a little upset about it. Like, what the,
Well, it always comes back, though. We know that.
Indeed, right? Indeed. And so it's just beautiful to hear you say what you're saying, and I'm like, wow, you're such a number 2. Interesting.
Well,
this summer, I'm actually I always wanted to help, let's say, fatherless kids, to do something with the arts. And I always thought, yeah, when I'm 60, I'll go ahead and do that. That'll be that part of my life. And so a few weeks ago, I was just like, why the hell do I always put these weird timetables on things. Why don't I just start now?
I saw your post about this. I think that's fabulous.
Awesome. Yeah. You reminded me of it. So we're doing that this summer. What was cool was I get up very early in the morning. I do this workout and writing thing, and sometimes I pray and scream and all kinds of things early in the morning. Uh, and in doing it, I I sometimes I go through this thing where I just kind of like almost preach to the air, right? Like in a basement. And it gives me incredible clarity into the invisible. And so I was like, as if I was talking to these young men that I'm going to be working with this summer. And I was trying to figure out what experience do I want them to have. And so I knew that the vehicle of the experience was through art. I knew, and I wrote these experiences down, and then I labeled one word to them all, right? And so the vehicle was art. I wanted them to have a sense of peace, trust. I want them through the art to understand that they can go into chaos and form order, um, you know, and and that it's their duty, it's their responsibility, right? And so these are the things that I want them to feel over this 6-week program. And so I took the first letter of each word and I put it in this little program on the internet that spits out words, and
Okay.
it came back adopt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was like, what? So I was like, well, that's what it is. It's and we're getting t-shirts made, and I want them to know two things. One, and actually there was another word, unity, right? So it was actually adopt you. And but then I just got rid of the you just so it looked better. And so the whole premise is I want to adopt them, but more importantly, have them understand as foster kids that the reality is daddy or mommy probably will never show up in their life. Um, and at some point, they have to be their own dad, right? And adopt themselves,
Oh,
adopt their coworkers, adopt their spouse, adopt their children, adopt themselves, adopt their neighbor, and just take that responsibility on. And so that's kind of the overall message of this art program. And we'll do these things through art. They'll learn these concepts through designing and sketching and that kind of stuff. So
that's just outstanding. That is something. Oh my gosh, just the impact that you can have. Just great concept. Crazy how the name came up, but
yeah,
I guess not really. I mean, things like that, have a way of happening. And oh my gosh, wow, that's
indeed.
awesome. Oh, I wish you
Yeah,
the best of success with that. I'm sure it will be.
we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
No, I don't like saying that. It will be
It
successful.
will be. Oh my gosh.
Period.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess what the whole we'll see where it goes just simply means you just take your steps and you move forward in confidence and boldness without expectation, right? And just
There
kind
you
of
go.
allow it to unfold and be sensitive to its unfolding.
Yes. And
So
enjoy the process
enjoy the process. That's exactly. So,
every day.
Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Victor.
And so let's officially start. That was the pre-show show. Uh, what are you currently working on?
Oh my gosh. So, well, as I'm sitting here talking to you with my computer on my lap, and I'm in my studio and I am facing my whip wall. You know what that is, right?
Your
The
whip? Oh
works
yeah,
in
your works in
progress.
progress roles. Okay.
Yes, yes. I've got 6 shelves going across with paintings sitting on them. And I've got so many works in progress. It's crazy. But it's making, actually, as I'm sitting here talking with you, it's just making me, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, wow, I really have a lot of stuff going on. But each one excites me in a different way. So,
Interesting.
yeah, so one of the things that I have going on in my studio right now is I'm really trying to get to finishing a lot of these works that are waiting to be finished. And it's kind of, each one's different. I'm not an artist who does a lot of the same thing, as you could see from my website.
Mm-hmm.
There's just too much that inspires me everywhere. So that's part of who I am. But anyway, that being said, so all these unfinished works, I'm also applying new techniques. As I think I mentioned in that thing I filled out for you, that I'm sort of taking a semi-sabbatical. I don't know if sabbatical is the right word to use, but and it's really from a self-imposed pressure to produce for galleries and to produce for shows. I just felt like I really needed some time to step back.
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of the time, I don't know about you, but if I'm painting for a deadline, I'm painting for a show, I don't feel my work is as good. I don't feel the as much joy in the process of creating. And it's like, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because of one of the reasons is because of the joy that it brings me to be painting and to be sharing. And if I'm just producing because I got to get this done, blah, 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 then.
It's kind of like, and this is going to be a very, very graphic, but I think it's going to be very, very spot on. You know how sometimes a husband and wife are trying maybe months, if not years, like daily trying to make a baby. And at some point, there's a humor that comes along with it sometimes because there's a frustration in you're past the lovemaking, you're past the purity and the joy of it, and it's becoming a task, right? Yeah. And it's still like this amazing, a miracle thing that you're trying to make happen, right? You're trying to make something out of nothing, right? And birthing, a human being, or create one. But at some point it becomes, it just robs the joy of it once there's like this other thing that's imposed on top of it. And I think that's it's a hard thing. And I talk to a lot of artists who struggle with that and who, like you, have decided, hey, let me take a little time and kind of get away from the deadlines, get rid of all the other people's expectations and just be with the art.
Yes. First of all, I want to say that, did you just think of that analogy or metaphor? Yeah. That's fabulous. That's a really good one. And you think about these couples who, where there's a question of infertility too. And when does the pregnancy happen? Oftentimes when they let go and give up.
Exactly.
Right. And and it just happens. And so I think that's such a good analogy, because with the creative process, it's, not that you can't make things happen on the timeline or with the deadline, you can, but wow, it's so special when it just gets to happen naturally.
I'll tell you a crazy story about that. There's 2 times in my life where women have come to me absolutely frustrated because they could never have a kid. They tried. They've gone to doctors. Doctors said no. And probably maybe about 10, 15 years ago, about 10 years ago, I guess, these in this one summer, these 2 ladies came to me at different times, and they asked if I would pray for them. It was weird. One asked if I would pray for him. The other one, we kind of did it. It came out of a conversation. That one, strangely, ended up having twins. And the other one, I remember like a year later, I went back to college or whatever it was, somewhere. And I guess it was college, maybe it wasn't. But I came back, and I think I went to Puerto Rico for 3 years. And then I came back, and I went walking through this local Walmart, and I heard someone screaming my name. And I was like, what the, it's the first time I was ever in that store, and her name was Wendy, and she came running up and she jumps on me and she's like, "Oh God, I gotta show you. I gotta show you." And she opens her wallet or whatever, and there was a photo of this little girl, right? And she had this baby, and the baby's maybe about, I would say about 3 years old, because I guess or 2 years old, or I guess she was at the time. And her and her husband Scott were just it was just one of those weird moments, and just like, okay. I don't know. It's every single person I've ever met, I have this weird ability to tell them exactly the sex of the baby and even pick the name. And I've never, ever been wrong in 30 years.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just like this weird. I had friends who called and I'm like, "Are you pregnant?" They're like, "How do you know?" And it's like, I don't know. I just feel it.
Oh, you got some kind of a good connection going on there with the invisible, I think.
I guess so. So, Susan.
Yes.
You're looking at your work on the wall.
Yeah.
And on shelves. And you're in this time of a sabbatical, this sabbatical for, let's say, the next year. What's going through your mind? Like, what's your mind focused on? What are you feeling? What are you trying to find?
Well, actually, this morning, I a lot of the times I think about this, but I'm sitting in a chair that I try to begin every day in my studio with some meditation. And when you were talking about that earlier, I thought, oh, there's another common thread we have. Kind of doing a little bit of writing, journaling, prayer, meditation, and anyway, one thing that really, well, it had come to me about a week or so ago during one of these times, and it came to me again this morning, that each of these pieces that are in various states of completion represent states of appreciation for me. And that's really what my work is all about. And so, it's such an interesting process that we go through. We're always kind of just exploring and discovering who we are, I think.
Hold on. Just to be clear, your work is about appreciation?
Exactly.
Okay.
Beautiful. I'm really, that it's because my work is my subject matter, what I'm drawn to paint, is so varied. But the common thread is that each one is about appreciating some aspect of life. And that, so I look at each, I'm looking at a barn that I painted across the street with this beautiful tree in front of it, a vase a rusty old pitcher with pink peonies, a little country lane in New Hope, Pennsylvania, a stream in the Adirondacks, boats on the water, still life with oranges, the lavender field I mentioned to you, a beach scene. There's so many, and there's some figures and portraits in there too. But each one, when I'm painting it, I guess this really, to me, speaks to how we are so blessed as artists, because so much of growing as an artist, or learning how to, even somebody who's just learning how to paint, is that you're learning to see, right? Mm-hmm. We learn how to see. And the more we learn to see, the more we see, the more beauty there is to see, the more we appreciate what there is to see. And the more we appreciate what we see, the more we see. It's kind of like this, it's a circle. And that came to me, and I was like, oh, that really is. So in each of these paintings, and in any time when I go out painting, I see something that just moves me. I'm so in appreciation of having this opportunity, of being in this place, of being able to see something, being able to take the time to look closely at it, to study it, to contemplate it, and then to try to And then there's the whole appreciation of putting it onto a canvas with paint
Mm-hmm.
and appreciating that process.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've heard of Dennis Perrin, right?
I don't
No.
think so.
Well, he's an artist in the Northeast, and he does a lot of he's got quite a good social media online presence right now. Does virtual workshops and things. But anyway, I saw a quote that he not even a quote. He just made a comment on one of his posts about falling in love with the process of painting.
Hmm.
And boy, did that strike a chord with me. Um, just being in, I mean, the love is there, but to be conscious of that while you're painting,
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing to appreciate. Anyway, so that's what I'm thinking about when I'm looking at all this work in here, is just how blessed I am that I have been all these places, had the opportunity to be with these objects, be the flowers in my garden, a still life on the table in here, to be at my easel, appreciating the quality of the paint, the working with it.
Hmm.
That there's so much appreciation, sense of appreciation, that I would hope that this is my way to spread some light into the world, to share that. And all artists do. I mean, this is not just me, but that we as artists do by
Mm-hmm.
sharing these things, bringing.
So let me ask you this question in that. How would you define or how would you feel when you're experiencing de-appreciation?
When I'm experiencing the
No, no,
appreciation.
no, no, no.
No.
De-appreciation.
Oh, depreciation. Oh, hmm. I try not to focus on that.
That's why I want you to focus on it for a minute.
I try. What good would that do me?
Well, because you don't know how white is until you take a moment to put
You're right.
black mark next to it.
You're right. No, I understand that.
And, and my hope is that just, I've dealt with, let's say, artists who've painted lakes for 20 years or flowers. And by getting them just to shift their perspective and ask a different question, all of a sudden they realize they've never known what a lake was or what a
Hmm.
flower was. They knew
Huh.
what it looked like, but they never knew a flower.
Yeah.
And so appreciation. I can hear it in everything you're saying. But what I'd like to do with you is dance with you a minute and just have you pivot and shift so that when you come back to appreciation, you may actually get a deposit of something deeper and more intentional. So
Okay.
that's why I'm asking you to shift and go into a different realm of de-appreciation. When something's de-appreciated, what happens to it, or how would that make you feel?
Oh, sad. I mean, just would feel to not appreciate. And then you know what? Actually, I think.
No. Stay on de-appreciation.
Okay.
Don't come out of that. See, if you're listening right now, the people that are listening, what you have just witnessed is a miracle. Now, what you just witnessed is Susan, when she was talking about appreciation, you could hear in her energy, in her voice, how it kept going higher and higher and higher and higher. And now in this moment, you can feel almost a draining of energy, right? You don't even have to explain what it is. We're experiencing de-appreciation right now. And what you just did is it made you feel so uncomfortable to be in that space that you just try to leap out of it. But I'm
Yeah.
going to hold you in here just for a moment, okay?
Okay.
Come into the realm of de-appreciation.
It's a dark place.
Yeah. And so what does this mean? What do you feel is happening when something is being de-appreciated?
Not being acknowledged, not being witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, somehow it's being blocked.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
if anyone's listening, go ahead and answer this question for yourself. Give me 2 or 3 more things that are, we want to go a little deeper, push a little deeper.
Depressed.
Hmm.
That would, it makes me, can I say something about that? Because it makes me think of, it's funny, my husband and I have had these conversations, and clearly I'm a very positive person.
Mm-hmm.
And I approach life that way, looking at the positive aspects. And we've had many conversations where, he will say to me, we just talk about, that, it's like, I just want everybody to come on the appreciation boat. and we've had these conversations where it's like, you know what, just some people just can't actually have, well, it's just, it's, I don't know.
This is beautiful. I love you.
Well, thank you.
You're struggling so hard. Like, you don't even want to de-appreciate people who live in de-appreciation.
No.
Like, I find this amazing. This shows, I'm going to be frank with you. It shows 2 things. One, an incredible healing that has occurred in you, right?
Okay.
At the same time, a terror that still lives in you. And it's it's like, you don't want to go into that cave.
No, I suppress that.
And you, exactly. And that's why I'm having us stop for a minute, because ultimately it comes all the way back to when you were born and abandoned. That's I tell you, I cry at 42 years old sometimes, because I wonder, will anyone ever love me?
Oh.
Like, or when I go into a relationship, it crushes me, because I want it forever, but the little demon voices just say, give it time. They'll get tired of you.
Mm. Oh.
Yeah. And, my greatest fear is that my children will get tired of me at some point. Right. And now that's how I used to think about it. Now I'm at a different place where I'm like, okay, that's a possibility. It's not the only outcome. How can I be responsible, right? And be of value to other people, which is really what appreciation is. It is the acknowledging of value in something.
Right.
Right. And that's what you're doing. You look at a tree and you're like, oh my God, you say it's blessed, but whatever that means, right?
Yeah, right.
It's a nice little Christianese way of saying it has worth, it has value. It's worth taking your most precious asset, which is your time, and spending time with it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Time is a love language. You're loving that tree. You're loving that still life. And that's why you don't want to be locked into some quote unquote style or subject, because it's not about honoring flowers, right? To one artist it is.
Right.
But to you it's not. It's about exploring love, like exploring the value of something that's been put before you,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an extremely beautiful thing. To me, that's what art is. That's painting is not art. And I know I just pissed off a lot of people, but listen to me clearly. Painting, there may be an art in painting, right? But when we say art, it's not painting. Painting is a performance, it's a medium. The art happens in the soul and in the mind.
Mm.
And if you don't have the skills then to communicate that through your medium, well, then you need to go get trained.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of great painters who are not artists because they cannot commune, they cannot see. They can copy, but they cannot see.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, I love how you're kind of almost helping me formulate this self-discovery of because I don't think a year ago I could have really said that. I think it was always there, but didn't quite understand it, and it's still being understood and expressed. But it's a journey. It's quite an amazing journey we get to be on.
It is. It is. And you know what's really beautiful is um, one of my spiritual mentors, Bill, and I've talked about him several times. We call him the CYO, the Chief Yoda Officer at the Academy. And he always says, you only meet yourself. You only meet yourself. And so what's beautiful is maybe through your adopted parents, through your husband, through your family, through school, whatever it is, the community, that the family and the community that you've been able to cling to, and they cling to you, right, and grow together. In that, by seeing value in them, you've been able to see your own value. And when I was younger, I remember saying, what would a woman want with me? All I can do is draw pretty pictures, but I have no name, I have no family, I have no money, I have no, I have nothing. I have nothing to give except I can draw a pretty picture. But how many gifts can you give as pretty pictures, right? Now that's a very different story in my head today. But I'm like, I got lots to give.
Yeah.
Right? As Peter said, silver and gold I have not, but what I do have, I freely give. But
and with your program that you're going to be doing with the young men or boys this summer, that's going to be such oh my gosh, I want to say it's a validation of that as you give it to them, what you're also regifting to yourself, I think.
Exactly. You're acknowledging that, right? And that's what I see you're doing is I mean, you could do a whole entire spend a whole year and do a whole show, and the title of it is just acknowledging appreciation. Or acknowledging maybe appreciation. Find maybe a smaller word just for marketing purposes. Acknowledging value, acknowledging worth, and there's a.
I think I want to call it states of appreciation.
Okay, there it is.
That's the name of it.
There it is.
What came to me.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I like that. Now, when you say states, let's investigate that, because we've investigated appreciation. Okay. Let's go a little deeper. See, what I'm actually walking you through is one of the first things when I bring an artist into the academy. We call it storytelling, or story. And before you put pencil to paper, you've got to know what your concept is, right? And so we break it down to really one word, then 3 words, then 2 sentences. And then ultimately it gives you the title of your show, and it gives you, like, before you even draw anything, you're already at a level of intimacy with the muse, and you know who she is so clearly that then after that, the most important question we ask, no matter what stage of the process that you're in, is how does that decision support your story? And most people can't answer that because they got like this idea, right? And then they want to run off and try to finish it, but they never really knew the idea, and they're trying to discover it through the process. So, we just spent 10, 15 minutes talking about appreciation, but what does state mean to you? What does that mean when you say states of appreciation?
It's kind of the essence of being present with whatever it is to me.
Is there movement in this state, or is it a stillness?
It's a feeling.
Okay, go with that. What do you mean by that?
Oh, it's somehow trying to. Uh, when I'm in a state of appreciation, well, there's healing in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's calm,
Mm-hmm.
there's tranquility, there's serenity, there's
So when I ask the
harmony,
question, is there movement or is it still? Then it would all your words are leaning towards this stillness.
stillness. Okay, yeah, stillness, I guess, is the correct answer then. Yes, appreciate. Yeah, state is
So let me ask you this: when
stillness.
you're in this state, right, which is interesting because it's we often say state of being, right, which is really a feeling.
Right.
Um, but the question is being what, right? And in this
Mm-hmm.
case, it's being appreciative,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the state, and I love that you're saying it's still, because you could be in a state where you're transitioning, you're trying to find, but that's not what we're
Mm.
experiencing.
Right, right. No,
You're
it's a moment, a millisecond or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you're not on the journey looking for the treasure. You found the treasure,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now you've opened it up, and now the gems are glowing, and that's you saw what was hidden, and that's the moment. That's the state. At least that's what I'm feeling from you.
Yes, absolutely. I love the way where you're putting it into words. Sometimes these things are really hard to put into words, but this is good. The exploration, trying to.
This
And
is
it,
one of the reasons why I started the podcast. The challenge was, how in the world do we talk about these experiences and making visual things using words? And so it's something I've worked on for 20 years to figure out how to do. And so I find it a joy when talking to someone like you who has this richness there, and then if I can come in and help, just throw a couple words in there that kind of open it up for us to see clearly.
it's
And
awesome.
and then you get to go back when you go to paint those, uh, with even a clearer consciousness.
Exactly. That's great. I love it. I'm enjoying this process. What next?
uh, so, the I, I like that. Okay, so we're looking at the states of appreciation, and how many images do you have there?
Oh, let's see. There's. Let's see. I've got 3 shelves on each side. Each one has 9. Let's see. 12. Say 24. 24 that are visible to me.
Two, 24 that are visible to you.
Well, because there's other ones behind the ones that are showing.
That's awesome. So then let's explore that for a second then. Why is it that none of them are finished?
Isn't that a good? I've been asking myself that question lately too, because the number keeps growing. Um,
Let me ask you it this way: are any of them pretty in their unfinished state?
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah,
that's the reason why I'm asking, because maybe potentially, and it's just a question to ask the muses. Um, are they even meant to be finished?
right. Yeah, that's a really good question. I have had a couple of them where they sat there for a year
Mm-hmm.
or more. And one of them I remember sat there, and then I was like, why am I not just framing this one? For some reason in my mind, it was not done, but it really was done. Um,
Because
Sometimes,
you're putting an expectation on it,
yeah.
you know.
Sometimes, like there's one in particular my eyes going to now. It's this one of this. It's a pure plein air I love painting plein air, and I really feel like nature is the best teacher. And it also, so in terms of informing color, value, sense of place, and to be able to just be there and get into that state of appreciation. But I rarely feel that a painting that I've done plein air is finished when I bring it back into the studio. And that's why a lot of these are plein air paintings that are sitting up there. But you're making me think, because I'm looking at this one thinking, it's sketchy, but if I work on it, maybe it just needs to be left the way it is, because it was just the description of a beautiful moment, and it's a little unfinished, but it's
Aren't they all? Isn't that the beautiful moments? It's not the polished things that you. I was just talking about this with my brother's spouse yesterday. They're building some walls and sliding doors, but they have like that barn look to it, And they went and they bought, brand new wood that's been stressed and to made look like it's been worn, right? just like jeans,
Yeah.
You buy them brand new, but they're made to look like they're not. And you have to be sensitive to this, because sometimes it's inappropriate to not finish something,
Yes. Yeah.
And sometimes it's inappropriate to finish it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like dressing your daughter up like an adult woman and she's a little girl,
Good point. No, just that's a good conversation to have, and going to have to
I think one way you can approach it is to lay them out and then allow your eye to find the similar messages. Because sometimes you think, oh, these 4 paintings are different paintings, and they're really, really not. It's just the same muse calling to you. And that you may find a message in all of that. I know years ago I set out to do a book. I called it The Pencil Prophet. It was just all of these dreams and visions that I had. And I drew them out. And I realized all of the ones that were in a rectangle were dreams, and all of the ones that were squares, compositions, were visions. I was like, that's weird. And then it made sense, because a dream is like more of a movie, where a vision is a moment, right? And I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. And then when I scanned over them, I realized out of these 20 to 30 images, there was maybe only 3, tops 4 themes, just repeating itself over and over and over again. So by laying them out, you might realize you don't have 24 images.
Oh, that's interesting. That'd be fun to do. It's good. I mean, you can't see these, they're going across an entire wall of my studio, and they're just like 3. I'll send you a picture. But you know what you're making me think that I want to do, because I actually do. I had been thinking about one thing, was that, like this barn that I mentioned to you with the tree, that there is a repeated theme in several of my paintings of a tree kind of framing something, a tree with a structure, a tree with water, a tree, there's this, it's something I seem to tend to do.
Is the tree heavy?
A lot.
Like a heavy shape in the composition, or is it more like
the tree is a focal point. Yeah. When I first began painting, my email address used to be tree painter.
Interesting. And what's the most important part about a tree?
A tree, trees are just precious. They're part, they nurture us. And I just, they from a physical standpoint, they purify the air that we breathe. They recycle, and from a spiritual standpoint, they're reaching up towards the heavens, the space, the atmosphere, and grounded. and the earth. We could go on talking about trees, but
No, keep going because I'm finding this very interesting. You're not going there, but keep going.
I'm not going to the place you think I'm going to go.
Yeah. And when you got close, you jumped off of it, just like when we were talking about de-appreciation and appreciation.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. So I talked about the physical aspects of it, that they give us shade from the sun. They help to even keep the earth from flooding because the roots take the water. So they recycle. So recycling, we watch them every year going through the cycles of being reborn. And
That's cool.
and
So there it was. You went there finally.
or not dying, but just going into hibernation. Okay, where do you want me to go?
Oh, you already went there. You got into the root conversation. But it was funny because you're like, and they touch the earth, and there, look at the birds in the sky, pigeons. And it was like as soon as you kind of like touched that ground, all of a sudden you jumped right back up into the sky and said, "Oh, they're spiritual." And I was like, "Wow, you went."
See, they're
give us oxygen.
They're kind of like me. They're grounded, but they're also out there. So,
absolutely. That's absolutely. I I drew these two trees once in this vision before I went to Portugal, and had this vision and for me, drawing is very. I'm going to make up a word right now. Praerotic. I just made that word up. Praerotic, meaning it's a prayer. Drawing is a prayer, and the reason why I say a prayer, where most people when they pray they talk, but deep prayer is listening.
Okay.
And and oftentimes when sketching, like there's something inside of us, that's calling, that needs to be given a body or flesh or. And so I remember looking at this. I'm sketching out this very, very large drawing, and it's this ocean, and it's slightly curved, and it comes to this land, and in this land, out of this land, is this big rock that just jumps out of the sky, right? And there's this little stone wall that goes around it, but when it gets to the rock, the stone wall stops, and then like the big rock is part of the wall, and then the stone wall continues, and it's on a cliff, like it's like a fortress almost type of thing. And then there's this beautiful bridge in the inside, and then in the back there's this huge cliff, all the way in the back, and I thought, oh, maybe it's Spain or somewhere like that, and then there was I drew in there 120 birds. And on the top of this rock were two trees that were intertwining with each other. And they were rooted in this rock. And I knew that was a vision of what I was building. Right. And what I realized is when I draw these visions out, it's just not one thing. Like I'll see that vision through the rest of my life because there's a message in it that keeps coming, up and up and up again. So when I got to Portugal, we went to a place called Sintra, and it was funny. We got caught in this place, and we had to jump this little wall, and we're walking down this mountain, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these big rocks are just laying on the along the side of the road, and then this stone wall, and we're walking by this stone wall, and all of a sudden this huge rock, like the wall stops and this huge rock is jetting out of this wall, and then the wall continues. I'm like, and in the picture it was like a regal place, and Sintra is where all the nobles and the regal people lived, right? So we were seeing castles and this and that, and I was like, oh my God. But what was the creepiest thing is out of one of these big rocks, there was a tree growing out of it. Somehow it rooted in the rock. I don't know how that happens or what, but um and I was like, hell no.
That's
Like
amazing. Wow.
it was creepy cool, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Um
wow. That's really cool. Very cool. I was thinking though, it's when, as you were saying that, though, Victor, about your drawing being a prayer, I was thinking how so it isn't that a state of appreciation?
absolutely.
Different kind. But what is really intriguing to me is that you're appreciating something that's not physically visible to you, but it's within, which is amazing. That's really interesting. I mean, I think that's really neat to be able to do that. I wish I could do that.
It's it's strange when people ask me how do I do that, right? And I'm like, oh, I was born with an eighth finger. I don't know, right? It's in the back of my neck. No, but this is where you become an appreciator. It's funny when I spend a lot of time in the church. Probably one of my greatest pet peeves with religion um, is it's built on fear, and I cannot comprehend God in fear.
Right.
Right? I mean, I remember 5 years old being in a foster home saying, uh, I'd like to go to church on Sunday. And I would sit out there at 5 years old by my own decision and stand on the street corner and wait for the little purple van to come by and take me to this church. And, um, and for some reason, at a very, very early age, I was a seeker. And and as I got older, understanding, that I was left at the hospital when I was born. I was born premature. I had drugs, alcohol, crack, cocaine in my system. I should be like this vegetable dead, handy, whatever, uh, and I'm not. And in fact, they actually say science, these people who are doing research on creativity, that sometimes drugs in the system unlocks insight and creativity in some people. There's some side effects that come with that, but um the and so as I got older, I was like, whoa, what a blessing. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what, and so for me, knowing that before I was even born I was protected,
Mm-hmm.
my relationship with the divine is based purely out of an appreciation, to the point like it's like a little boy with a dragon or a bear, right? Like the thing could rip you apart. There is a reality that you could be in fear of its great power, and yet that is so not your experience that you just crawl on this thing that could devour you and your whole town, and yet it doesn't even it not even one part of your cell has any fear in it.
Hmm.
And and so as I grew older and people would fail me continuously, situations would fail, systems would fail. What never failed was me, in my imagination, in that divine relationship. And
Yeah.
so
Connect.
uh yeah, and so I spent a lot of time looking inside and drawing that versus you know, like I say, I did plain soul instead of plain air. But uh so now I have this beautiful privilege to help other artists kind of, uh, go into that darkness of, which is them.
It's really illuminating to do that, interestingly enough.
Yeah,
No, I mean, that's kind of, I said that. I thought that sounds kind of funny, but
but
no,
it's the truth.
but it is the truth.
It-
Going into the darkness is illuminating.
yeah, oftentimes the truth is in the darkness,
Mm.
and it's in the light that things. It's like when you're driving and you see and you're like looking out for the police. Well, the best thing to do is look at the like what's in the open. They always hide in the open,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so, the, the danger is not in the darkness. It's what's right in front of you. That's why, like, most car accidents happen within miles from someone's home,
Yeah.
right? Because they're familiar to it. But when you're
Right.
not, all of a sudden you're more cautious, more alert, more
Right.
aware.
You know, it's funny too, Victor. I'm just thinking to myself, what most often will draw me to paint in the landscape is something with very strong light dark contrast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a painter who, would be like all high key or, um, middle. I mean, I always like to have something really. It's just what I mean. I think that's probably just natural for the human eye, but it's also something that I choose to look. I always choose to paint. I love that. So I
So
wonder, that's underlying. Just another way of expressing that, seeking that.
I wanted to ask you about your painting because when I looked at your work, I felt the spirit of Sargent through it.
That kind of that blew my mind that you said that. That's so wow. What a compliment.
And what's cool is I'm meeting a couple artists who have that same tinge to them, right? And I think it's something in the palette, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Um, it's like this. If I was going to describe Sargent, and by Sargent, to me, Sargent is not a person, it's a state. He's a state of being. And when you tap into that perspective, that energy, um, what I find is that there becomes a very profound power in a very, what I'll call a brown palette, right?
Mm.
It's like this subtle muted brown. It's not, I don't call it grays. When you get into the grays, I start thinking more like the Monets, right?
Right,
But
right.
but the Sargent, his images are warm.
That's what I was
There's a
going to say. There's more warmth to it. Yeah.
yeah, there's a warmth to it, um, and there's almost like imagine a Rubik's cube, right? All jumbled up, so you have all these little squares of color everywhere, and then you take clay and you wrap this Rubik's cube in clay. So just but it's fine enough that there's color that pops out of this warm clay, but it's thick enough that there's like a harmony to all of the color,
Hmm.
right? Like
Mhm.
there, there's something in that I find like in your work. Um, what were you gonna say?
No, just that's really interesting. I mean, and I certainly, Sargent is certainly, uh, the state of Sargent is certainly something that inspires me and, um, as a painter. So if that's coming through my work in that way, that's, then
Yeah, it's
that makes me
beautiful.
feel pretty good. Do you see that? But,
Now, what was your journey in? And I really don't tend to talk about color too much.
mhm.
You know, Van Gogh once said, "You can't be on the equator and the North Pole at the same time. So pick a line. My line is color. Color is not my line. My line is design and composition and storytelling. And I think the globe is storytelling, but I tell my stories through design and composition. So we'll get into a conversation about the um, um, dynamic symmetry and things like that because I saw you wrote about that.
Yeah, yeah. This is a new territory to me because I knew nothing about it until I was at the plein air convention in Santa Fe in April and went to Kevin McPherson's workshop.
Oh yeah, I heard about this.
Yes, and he talked about that, and I was just like, and it's so funny because I swear every other artist I talked to is like, "Oh yeah, I know about that." I'm like, "I've never heard of this before.
No
How did I
one
never hear about
they don't
this?"
know about it.
Huh?
They only think they know about
They
it.
think that.
And I'll say
So
that boldly because
that's what you do.
that's what I do. And it's one of those things, like somebody would say, like if I ever said I know how to paint, there would be somebody that no, 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 no. You know how to move stuff around with a brush. You don't know how to paint. And it would be the truth. I don't consider myself a painter. I could defend myself probably against 80% of people, but my standards, 80 is not good enough, right? So, like someone like you, I just, my knees bow, very, very
Oh,
quickly.
wow.
Um,
Thank you.
so, but that's where I want to go right now with this conversation is in painting, and color. What was your personal journey like? I'm sure when you first started, you're squeezing paint right out of the tube and using it there, and then like, what was that evolution like that got you to? Was there like 2 or 3 moments that were kind of like big leaps for you in terms of painting and color? Not into not in drawing or design, but like just painting and color concepts.
Right. Oh my goodness. Well, when I started painting, when I made the decision, because I would not have not formally trained in the sense of I didn't go to art school.
Really?
No, I was one of these, let's get out the world's smallest violin that many artists have, where I always wanted to go to art school, but my parents wouldn't let me because I needed to have a job that would pay, give me security. So,
Smallest violin. I'm
so
surprised I even said really, because I mean, anyone who goes to art school realizes you're not learning that in art school. But
I know so many people have told me that over the years, but nonetheless, I became a speech pathologist. So I was in college for 6 years doing that and learning that, and did that for about 20 years. When I met an artist at a jewelry show, she was making jewelry in conjunction with being a painter. And I guess this was just another creative outlet for her. And was at my neighbor's house across the street, and we just really connected. It was one of those things I mentioned to you about an earlier conversation about where you kind of look into somebody's eyes and you think, are we sisters? Do I know you? You know? But it was very interesting. Anyway, her name was Nancy, and so I just was in awe of her. And I said, well, Nancy, when I'm retired, I'm going to be like you. I'm going to have my little easel out by the water's edge, painting seascapes. And she looked at me like I had 3 heads, and said, Susan, if painting is something that brings you joy, you should be doing this every day. And I said, well, that's great. But I have a full-time job, and how am I going to do that? She says, come on. She says, buy yourself a box of watercolors and a sketchbook. You have flowers in your garden, leave it on your kitchen table, and take a half hour, find a half hour in your day, go out and paint the flowers in your garden. So I really took that to heart. And so the next week I went out and I bought a box of watercolor pans and some brushes and a book. And I went out into my garden and started painting the flowers. And it was like, boy, like part of me had been missing. And it was like, it was like being like really having a missing limb reattached or something. Indeed. Like I was whole. And anyway, so that's where once I started doing that, my very early paintings were with no instruction, just painting watercolor botanicals. And I started selling them right away, and kind of brazen. And I ended up taking I did take a sabbatical from my job a year later just to try my hand at painting. And once I did that, I knew that there was no turning back. But what I did for 5 years so that I could, because we were losing a big chunk of the household income by me doing this, and certainly can't jump into the field of fine art instantly, without. I was started out as a decorative painter. So I was doing murals in people's houses, and I was going to antique shows and estate sales, buying old furniture that was still sound. And I had a garage full of furniture, which I would paint, restore. And actually I was doing fine art on furniture. It was kind of not very cost effective on my part to do it that way, but that's what I loved to do. And then I would take them, I'd rent a U-Haul truck and go do home and garden shows and sold my furniture that way and did that for 5 years.
Awesome.
It was a way for me to be painting and making money. And that was great. But then after 5 years of doing that, and it was a lot of work, and I was like, but this isn't really what I want to do. What I really want to do is I want to paint on canvas. I want to make paintings. So fine art. So I sold all the rest of the furniture, gave that up, and I started studying at the Silvermine School of Fine Art, which is here in Connecticut. And Kirill Daron, who was he's a Russian artist who's been an instructor there for years. I studied with him for 2 years, and he just really taught me the basics. Because honestly, I mean, words like value, temperature, all that I really didn't know much about all that at that point. I just was totally painting by whatever innate ability I had. So anyway, so he really gave me the basics, learning about color, chroma, value, light, all that stuff. And then it's been an ongoing thing ever since then. So that was the turning point for me as a painter. And then through the years since then, I continued to study. Clayton Beck was another wonderful instructor who he's from Chicago. And I belonged to a group of painters in Brattleboro, Vermont. Would go there twice a month. We had a studio, and Clayton, more or less, we would come there a few times a year and mentor our group. There we were doing portrait and figurative painting mostly, but he was another great teacher. So I'm mentioning two teachers who really, I feel, gave me some wonderful foundational skills as a painter. And then from there, moving on, just every year I try to take a workshop with someone whose work inspires me and integrating things that I learn into my own process, which I'm now figuring out, which I'm always figuring out, and I'll always be figuring out, I think.
Exactly.
But anyway, that's kind of my history.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Thanks. And becoming a member of the Salmagundi Club, that was huge. That was always a goal of mine. I always just thought that would be an amazing thing. And if I could get good enough to become a member there, which I think I did in, 2008 maybe was when I became a member of that club. And it's a great organization. So it's like such an honor to be part of a place, a group like that where history was made and just going. Have you ever visited there?
I have not yet. I've been invited, but I haven't made the trip up yet.
You should go. It's
actually, I'm going to be calling them after we're done with this podcast because I wanted to see if I could do a talk there. And my whole teaching design and composition was inspired by somebody from the Salmagundi Club, and she interpreted one of my dreams that I had, and she's like, if you don't teach this, then you're gonna regret this.
You should. You totally should be doing a presentation at least there. I'll come.
Yeah, and I'm sure Michelle will, and Costanza. Well, Costanza was the one who told me I need to get design out. She let the dog out. That's what we used to laugh about it. But it's another story for another day. So how long?
Can I just say, I feel like, oh my gosh. And when I was mentioning about all the basics that I learned, I didn't even mention composition.
Nope. But I'm sure you learned some from the Russian.
I sure did.
The Russians are known for composing because when we had the abstract expressionism come in, they were protected because they were blocked off. So they didn't get that influence. So they kept with a lot of the old traditions. And so when I hear somebody is being trained or by a Russian, it just warms my heart. Like, damn, they're getting something that other people should be jealous of.
Yeah, something special.
Yeah.
Well, it's
It,
available out there. So I'm sorry. So you were moving somewhere else, and I interrupted.
yeah. So we were talking about the Salmagundi. The yeah. So I'll call them later. But the well, let's talk about this now. You did mention that you're interested in dynamic symmetry, and I'm kind of curious. You said you saw that happening at that workshop. I believe one of my students was actually at that workshop,
Oh
and she
yeah.
came back and she's like, "Don Victor, they were teaching this thing, da 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 da," right? And so I went on. And I was like, "Really?" And I'm looking it up. I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." Um,
Well,
but yeah, do share.
there was okay, yeah, that it was I was totally not understanding and a little confused by what I was shown out there. But then so I've been just looking on the internet, and um and there was, and somebody also found Andrew Loomis. I'm sure you
Oh, of course, Andrew Loomis.
that book, and I've seen some of the. I have not read it. I have to. I should. I really should get that book and read it. But some of the illustrations from that, just doing a basic. See, now I'm beginning. It's funny. I actually was talking with Michelle yesterday,
Mm.
this is Michelle Byrne, and who
Hi, Michelle.
you'll have to get her to listen to this. And she was showing me. She sent me a picture of something that she's working on with a grid. And so, see, I didn't, and I was like, okay, well, the impression, and this is without really, I mean, I probably would benefit from learning from you, because where I was going with it was kind of in making a grid sort of just intuitively and then working a design into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what she was, and I should let you do the talking about this, that there are actual specific grids types for certain size canvases or paintings. And anyway, you talk about that, because I'm not the expert in that.
Yeah, there's a certain number of grids. Most of the time, people talk about the grids as if there's only one, the phi, the golden section grid, right? But there's a reason why that's a very unique grid. And by grid, let's call it a rectangle, okay? The shape of the rectangle. And so what's interesting is if you go on the internet, they'll often talk about it in primarily three ways. One will be about the divine proportion, right? Which is, you take a line and you divide it here, and now it's divine, right? And that's true. But it's kind of like looking at a human and only looking at its foot and saying that the foot is the human, right?
Right. Okay.
Okay. So it has a function. It has a certain you can appreciate it at some level, but it doesn't unlock it. So then what happens is then they make the box and they put the square in, and then they do the curve, right? And then all it really becomes is about this curve. And okay, so now you're up to like the kneecap, right? But again, like the only time that ever looked cool was in the show Christmas Story, I think it was, with the, hey, you're gonna shoot your eye out, kid, where the dad had that lamp. It was just like a leg up to the kneecap. But and then there are a few people out there who actually studied it. Right now, the two main guys who teach it, they're photographers, so they spend most of their time teaching photographers how to design and compose.
Yeah, actually, when I was looking on the internet for information on it, that's what came up was photographers. So
yeah, so there's Adam Morelli and Tavis. Why can't I think of Tavis's last name right now? Huh? but they're both really, really good at what they're doing. They're beautiful people, beautiful souls. Um, I actually introduced the system to Tavis. He found one of my videos, and we began to talk. And then
Oh, funny. I think his is one of the pages that I came across. That
yeah, it's
name.
like
Yeah.
IPOC Studios or something.
Okay.
And so he does. He challenged himself when he was studying it to do basically a blog post a year, a day. So he had 365 posts.
Wow.
Um, and so these guys have been doing it for a couple years now. And they studied under my master, Myron Barnstone. I met Byron 30 some, almost 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Uh, and and so those are good guys to learn if you want to really just learn more about the layout. And that's where a
Mhm.
lot of people will use it. They'll be, oh, if I draw a grid as a scaffolding, then I can kind of lay things out, right?
Yeah, that was the impression that I had gotten of what it was. But
Yeah,
but you
but it goes far, far deeper because the scaffolding is really the DNA of the entire image. And every line, every space, every value that you put together is actually a part of it's all determined by what is already organically in the rectangle. And so there's a way of breaking down a rectangle that's going to give you 8 lines, and a master composer only uses 5 to 7. Now, in a circle, we'll say there's 360 degrees, right? Or lines. Just like when you're using paint, you have to know how to limit your color. There's millions of colors you could make, right? But you have to know how to limit it. And that limited palette creates mood, it creates all kinds of things, right? And so a skilled painter limits, a skilled draftsman, a skilled composer limits their spacing. They're not just random spaces, size spaces, and they'll limit the directions of the lines that they make. But the question is, where do you get this information from? It,
right.
it comes from the rectangle itself. And every rectangle, even if it's 1 degree off, a shift gives you a whole different set of lines and different measurements.
Huh.
And so this is, it's not about quote the golden section or the divine proportion. It's really about the dynamic symmetry. But you have to know how to get that. And when
Uh-huh.
you do, it gives you the grammar, it gives you the math. You know, it elevates the art into a science and into a language, actually a legitimate language that communicates, which I think you would be very fascinated in by because of your, teaching people how to talk.
Yeah. Well, I do think that we're going to have a conversation about this.
I'll tell you a cool story. One of my students, Donna Vorbach, she's an incredible portrait artist. She's probably done 40, 50 portraits with very well-heeled families. It's funny. I'll tell you a funny story about that. I'm going on a tangent here. She's telling me about, that she went out and she's like, I didn't know what well-heeled meant, right? I didn't I didn't grow up with well-heeled people, right? Healed people. And so she's like, yeah, I went out and I was hustling and I was knocking on doors, and when she first started, and she's like, and she went to this pool, and there was in the baby pool there was this little kid and the mom and the dad, and she said, and they were a well-heeled couple, and I'm like, and I thought to myself, oh, what? She just gave birth and she's like healed? Like, what does that even mean? Like. But I dare not say that, right? So I'm glad I cut my mouth shut. But so anyway, she deals with very affluent people, and so one of our first project that we worked on was a portrait of 4 children. And where most artists would be, okay, let me get the eyeballs, the teeth, the hair right. And you have to have that at some level. But the truth is, unless you're up close and that portrait is in your face, does that stuff matter? Because most of the time when we deal with art, we deal with it in a peripheral experience. It's in our space, not in our face. And the artist is often approaching the art as something that you're going to be consciously looking at, not something that broadcasts to you. And when you get that, and then you start designing the energy of the people, which is really the souls of the people in there, it changes everything. And so we did that with this portrait, and we gave it to the woman who commissioned it. She loved it so much. She put it in this like $3,000 gold frame, hung it in her house. Mm-hmm. But what was interesting is this week, one of her friends stopped on by and she saw the painting. Now, this friend, I think her grandfather started the Pittsburgh Steelers or something like that, like very powerful family. And she saw the portrait, and it so happens that I think she's hired Donna to do like 3 portraits in the past, and one of her portraits won some national award, so like Donna's like good. But she came back to Donna this week and she says, I love your work, Donna, but whatever you did in that, I need that. Wow. And so she's now commissioned her 3 more portraits, and Donna will be going out next week to take the photos and stuff. And wow. She's like, yeah, but So what I do with Donna is like when Donna gets these commissions, then she pays me like a percentage, which is kind of cool. But then I just help her design and compose these stories and that energy that's underneath it all. Because her skill at doing a portrait is incredible. But when you can design and go beyond what you just look at so that people actually are feeling, when you have 4 children in there and each one, yes, they look like the kids, but they feel like the essence of each kid. And the trick to doing it is you have to know how to move the eye. And that's the whole thing. It's not what you look at. It's actually how you make the eye move.
Yeah, is akin to saying, like, I often think that when I'm painting that you're creating a map for the eye to follow.
Yep.
By using edges. Other tools to do that are your manipulation of edges and contrast and all that stuff, right?
Absolutely. Now, most composition books and most composition quote unquote classes will teach you how to move the eye so it's not boring, right? They don't teach you how to move the eye so that it actually triggers an emotional reaction in the viewer.
No.
Right. And Norman Rockwell said, because he could do that in a way that would actually make you feel 2 emotions, not just 1, but 2, it was one of the secrets to his success. Right. And so visually, let's say, I always use this example when he paints, a boy coming home from the war, and mom and the parents are coming out to, grab the boy, and the neighbors, the kids are all like, oh my God, there's all this excitement and fast moving. And Rockwell's done this. I can think about 4 paintings off the top of my head where he's done the same exact technique. All of this energy focused on the boy who's coming home, and the boy's usually standing still, right? Because he's kind of like getting prepared for this onslaught of love. And yet off in the corner, once your eye moves into that corner area, his little sweetheart is there, and she's very still, very quiet, waiting her turn. She doesn't have the right, quote unquote, right yet to go and put her arms around him, but there's the tension of that, right? And it's just not in the way because she's standing there, but it's about how did you organize those edges, those lines that create what I call this visual vibration that when we see it, we know, we feel it, And so that's that's where storytelling, design, composition becomes super, super important for artists. It's always been. And it's super important. It's my life's mission to help restore that, um, because when you have it, it's just amazing the fulfillment artists feel because they can actually communicate deeper those things that they see.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about that. That's fascinating. And it's an area for me where um, I'm lacking in that knowledge. So
Every artist should learn it, but you definitely should because you have the internal structure for it. Like you would excel because you have high standards in what you do in terms of your craft, but you also have this extreme sensitivity, like just reading over your stuff, the conversation here, looking at your work, just your life, the way you speak of it. I've had people who approached me who wanted to learn, but I could tell that um, their souls were not right.
hmm.
And I can't go before my maker and say I've empowered people to leverage this kind of power for malicious intent, right? So I always tell this story about Rockwell versus Hitler. Both designers,
Hmm.
both understood the power and the psychology of art. Both inspired an idea of a nation. But to what end?
Hmm.
You see, and
Profoundly different.
very same tools,
Hmm.
just so if you can get the Loomis book, that's a great book. um Loomis was Rockwell's, what I call his artistic brother. They both were fathered by George Bridgman out of the Students Art League.
Oh, okay.
um and so there's this beautiful heritage of design and storytelling. What's even cool is like when I was about 15, 14, I went to an auction, and I guess some local artist died, and it was the first time I got to like bid on something, and so I won, and my reaction was like, yeah, right. It was like so excited. It was awesome. And when I got the box, I didn't even know what was in it. I think there was like a bunch of paints, but there was this huge manual. It was like this 3-ring binder, might have been 5 rings, but it had all these artists like Loomis and Rockwell and a whole bunch of people I don't even know or remember. And they all came together, uh, and they put this huge manual together on illustration, art making, things like that. And it's very cool because Loomis is known for his literature and his writing and his teaching, right? His
Mhm.
teacher, Bridgman, was known for his teaching. His teacher, Bridgman, was taught by Jerome, and Jerome and Brog built the Brog books that a lot of ateliers use to help teach. Um, Actually, I think it was, and then Jerome was taught by Delaroche, and in Delaroche's studio, he ultimately let Gailey take it over, and Gailey basically trained Monet, Renoir, all those guys. Not growing up, having this love for art, but also being a foster kid, desiring family, gave me a very weird perspective, and I started asking strange questions. And then all of a sudden, I mapped out, I think it was almost 500 years of student master relationships, which I called father son relationships. And it's this thing I call art lineage, and it's just this huge family tree. And I remember there's an artist in Puerto Rico. Um, I loved his work, but they showed a sketchbook before he went into the war, and he sucked. And then when he had his GI Bill, he went up and he studied under George Bridgman, and he came back as one of Puerto Rico's greatest artists. And in Ponce, he has a painting that he did, a design. And in the same museum is this Jerome painting. And yet no one would ever know that Jerome was his artistic grandfather. It was only one generation, They would just say, oh, that's a master from, France, but not having any clue that there's this beautiful connection.
Wow.
So, yeah. So let me ask you one last question before we wrap up here.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about a lot of things. Actually, I want to ask you two, if you don't mind, because this was one that I really, really wanted to know. You studied how to help people talk better. I'm assuming that's the way I put it, but how would you explain it?
Yeah, well, yes. Speech and language pathology has to do with the communication, and in your training, you're trained to work with all ages, from infancy through elderly, stroke patients, that kind of thing. But what I ended up doing was working in the public schools, initially running a preschool program. So I was working with the birth to 3 population, early identification of children that were not, that their communication skills weren't developing. And then later going into more elementary school. So kids who had trouble just the communication language wise, forming, vocabulary, forming sentences, or articulation, the speech sounds, like the kids who you couldn't understand them because they, just couldn't form the sounds. And, these could be things that would kind of just related to, could be a physical thing, but in most cases not, just a developmental difference in the learning. And so that's, and I worked for quite a while in the public schools with the K through 5. I did a little bit of the middle school and high school as well, but that's what I did. Does that answer the question?
Well, that gives some clarity on what that is. So my question then with it is, as you move from that profession into your art, were there any moments where you got revelation or insight into, oh my goodness, what I was doing there actually applies here, just with a little bit of a tweak?
Actually, it was probably more the other way around.
Oh, okay. That's brilliant.
Because I'll explain that because
sure.
I don't haven't had any revelations in the direction that you're talking about, but because I was a creative person, an artist, even though I was not in an art job or whatever, I was always using my skills to make things, making picture cards, books, drawings, incorporating craft, arts and crafts activities into what I was doing with the kids to teach them. So it was more the other way around. But
that's cool.
Yeah. No, I can't say that there's anything related that I brought forward with me from there. But actually, now I take that back because for many years, so people would ask me to teach, if I would teach, and I always said no, because I taught for 20 years and I didn't really get to paint and create the way I wanted to. So to me, the painting was for me, not to be teaching it. I didn't want to have anything to do with teaching, but that all changed. I started feeling over the last few years that, and also initially I wouldn't have had the skills to teach. I mean, I didn't know enough about painting that I felt I was qualified to teach anything to anybody. But, in recent years, I certainly did feel that I have a knowledge base that I could certainly share, and started kind of thinking, well, maybe. And then also over the last year, we put an addition onto our house, and I now have a bona fide space where I could have somebody come in, which I didn't have before. My studio used to be upstairs in a small bedroom.
Mm.
And so I was actually talking with a friend, Carol Arnold, who's one of the Putney painters and has painted with Richard Schmid for several years. And he's no longer running the group, the Putney Painters. This was the group of artists that he would invite to come, to paint with him up in Putney, Vermont. And are you familiar with that group at all, or?
Honestly, I'm one of the reasons I'm doing these podcasts is to get familiar with artists, because I'm like blind when it comes to that. But I do know Schmidt.
Oh, sure, of course. So yeah. So anyway, she has had the benefit of painting with him now for I don't know how many years. I'm going to throw a guess out there, say maybe 10 years, something like that. And
wow.
The Putney painters who paint with him, they all would benefit from he would paint with them, but then offer his help, and he's a very generous teacher. I've actually had the benefit of painting where he in a group where he came a couple of times, and had him help me with one of my paintings one time, and it was quite a wonderful experience. But anyway, so Carol has taken over the administration of this group, the Putney Painters, now that Richard's not doing that anymore. And she was telling me how she said to him, that just wanted, if there was thanking him for all his years and how he had helped her, and if there was something that she could do to repay him, and his comment was that the way she could repay him would be to pay it forward and go out and share the knowledge with others. And when she said that to me, I can tell you that was a pivotal moment for me, because all of a sudden I was like, oh boy, I'm being selfish. Because I have knowledge I could share now, and I should be, and people have been generous enough to share it with me, and I need to, I'm over, the feeling like I don't want to be teaching anymore. So I started teaching in January.
Oh,
and
wow.
New for me. At the moment, I only have one student who comes to my studio once a week, and it's just been delightful. I'm really enjoying it. But the thing is that for me, I am bringing with me 20 years of teaching experience teaching a different subject. So isn't that funny how I started out saying, nah, I didn't bring anything forward with me. I really did.
You do have to remember she's not 3 years old, and so you don't want to lay out the blocks in the toys.
No.
Pick out the square one, Yeah. Although that's actually not a bad idea.
Really, there you go.
Teaching them to see.
Yes, but it wasn't just preschoolers through those years. It was, as I said, elementary school, and I even did a little bit of middle and high school too. So there were some other elements in there that were good to apply. Anyway,
I'm actually glad that you're teaching. It's actually one of the things I look at for the students that I have, because my definition of success is grandfathering. Success isn't something that you do. Success isn't an event. It's a process, right? And so I always thought, man, it's great if you have values or a way of doing, like something that's unique that you can pass on to your children. But when your children then pass it on, that means they've internalized it, they understood it, and that more importantly, they know how to cast it forward, right?
Exactly. And it's the final stage of really learning something too, is to be able to teach it to someone else.
Exactly. So I'm so happy that you're teaching.
Thanks. Me too.
Yeah, because you got girl, you got some fruit. People want to eat from that tree. So talking about that, eating from the tree, I'll tell you, my son, when he started, when he was a little guy, he had a little um,
You're going to say something to do with his speech?
yeah. What do you guys call yourself? Like a little language helper, right?
Okay.
She wasn't really little; she was taller than him. But and actually, I got a little irritated because he didn't talk for like 2 years or 2.5 years. He didn't say anything, and and I read this article on Einstein syndrome, and I was like, either my son's hand, like something's not working right upstairs, or it's working so right that he just decided not to talk. And I always leaned to the second one.
Of course.
And then I had this whole Einstein theory, except that they say that I think 75% of people who have Einstein syndrome, which is just basically they don't talk because they're so highly intelligent. One of the parents tend to be an accountant, and the other one tends to be a musician. And it's the combination of, and it was like 2 out of 3 of these kids, their parents had like this weird combination.
Wow.
So it's very interesting. So he had somebody who came in, but it was funny. We were in this Mexican restaurant. At the time, my wife, who was from Guatemala, her family came down, so we went out to eat, some Latin food. And we were talking like about Solomon not talking. And my daughter says, he talks. And we're like, what are you talking about? We've known him for 2.5 years. He doesn't talk. And she's like, no, he talks all the time. And she walks over to him and she does something. And he says, turtle. And it was the first time we ever heard him talk was at this restaurant. And we're just like, what the? And I guess they talked when nobody was around, So the reason why I told you that story, yes, to relate to the talking, but more to get you to the conversation of food. So we're at this Mexican restaurant. So I have to ask you before we end this conversation, which has been beautifully long and beautifully wonderful.
Same. I feel the same. Thank you. I've enjoyed it. It's been awesome. A great experience.
It has been. It's really, really cool. We had a couple little technical difficulties, but despite that, we've made this a treasure.
There you go. I like that. So Mexican
Susan,
food?
Susan, what do you love to eat?
Oh, gosh. You know what? I know I went on that form. I wrote eggplant parmesan, which I love. But I especially love custardy desserts.
Oh my God. We are so the same. Oh, okay. Bring it. I'm going to talk. God. The Mexican restaurant that we went to, the only reason I love going there is they have the best flan in the world.
Oh.
But yes, talk about these custardy desserts,
Custardy desserts. Oh my gosh. Okay. I was in Bermuda recently. Had an amazing English trifle that had a custard filling in it. Oh, that was really good. And then there's bread pudding, which I love. Coconut custard pie, a good one. Anything like custard, but especially though a really good. Oh gosh, like these bread puddings. I've only had them really down in Bermuda, because we've been going there every year for the past 4 years with some friends who have rented a house down there. It's been really fun opportunity. It's kind of like a short, like a long weekend.
Nice.
Visit, and it's anyway. They made, and so I don't know if it's it must be the bread pudding thing is like I'm not sure if it's a British derivation or what it is, but they serve it with a warm vanilla sauce, and it's like this custardy. I don't know, like this. Imagine French toast, but really soaked with eggs, custard, and then with a warm vanilla sauce over it. It's really good. So that's what I love. So what custard things do you love? Oh, wait a minute. One more.
Yes, yes.
My brain must be a little. There's another one. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Creme caramel. And it's almost impossible to find anybody who serves that. They do creme brulee a lot, but not creme caramel. And there's a difference.
Wow. Where did you have that at?
Oh gosh, don't ask me. It's been so long since I had it that I don't even know who make it. It's like it seems to have gone by the wayside in terms of restaurants serving it. Because creme caramel is definitely more like an egg custard, whereas creme brulee is more I want to say more of a mousse texture almost. It's a different texture.
Yeah.
So, and the caramel, you get that a brulee. They both have crusty tops.
Mm-hmm.
But the creme caramel, if you can ever find it anywhere, I should Google, see what restaurants serve creme caramel. Maybe I could find somebody who serves it and go there.
Indeed.
Okay.
Wow.
You're on.
I'm on. My absolute favorite is a Portuguese postre that is called pastel nata, and it's a small little custard. It's almost like a little pie, and I'd have one every morning with my espresso. Oh my gosh, they're so good. And in Portugal, there were so many egg-based custardy types of foods, and it's weird. Like when I got back here, I was like, there is none like that. Like there's very little. Like there's creme brulee type of experience, flan, but those tend, but they're not like you have to go to like a special almost ethnic restaurant to get these things, right? But as an American culture, Pennsylvania culture, I'm not sure we have something like that. And I could be totally, totally wrong. I just haven't discovered it yet. And maybe I shouldn't discover it.
Did you say, when you said it's pashtu nata, is that what you called it?
Yeah, pashta nata.
Pashta.
Like
nata.
almost like it almost looks like pastel nata.
Okay.
NATA.
I have to find it myself so I can try it.
Yeah, it's like, so they have that one. They just have like tons of these pastries. It's very big. I mean, that's one thing like I haven't really seen much in our culture, American culture, is like the art of dessert and bread outside of something that's fancy, but I mean like on an everyday level.
Yeah.
And in a lot of these, when I was in Puerto Rico, they have things called panaderias, and it was kind of, we don't really have an equivalent to. I mean, it's kind of like a deli, I guess you could call it, right? Where you go in and you get sandwiches and desserts and things like that. But it was a place where they made bread. And in Portugal, they I don't think they call them panaderias, but they had all these kinds of places you would go and buy bread, fresh bread, desserts, and I missed that a lot, and I missed the custardy desserts over there. But you mentioned one that I know we have around here. What was sponge cake? Not a sponge cake. It was
not the creme caramel.
It was more of a pie type of
bread. What did I say? Bread. It was before I said bread pudding. Trifle, English trifle.
No, it was after that.
It was the bread pudding.
Coconut custard. That's what it was.
Coconut custard pie.
Yes. And yeah. And
that's readily available.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna go find one.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I never thought about it. I'm like, oh wait, that's right.
Go to a bakery though, get a real good one instead of I know they sell them at the grocery store, but if you're gonna.
I guess I have to find a bakery. That's my whole point. Is like I don't know where any are.
Oh geez, where are you? Where are you located?
Near Kutztown.
Okay, I don't know that part of Pennsylvania.
I'll have to look. I'll go online and type in bakery and do a search again. I know we have like our bakeries for the most part are like big, huge bread factories, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So like that, maybe that's the maybe back in the old days before they got like all industrialized, you know, they had all these little bread shops around.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, when you go into the to visit the Salmagundi Club,
mhm.
well, you'll find something there in the village or thereabouts. So lots of
Okay, cool.
little bakery things
So
around
we'll have
there.
to keep in touch on that and get up there. I want to be up there. I know Costanza's one said, "Oh, I'll take you out to dinner there." And I was like, "Oh, I guess you can eat there. That's cool."
Yes, yeah, they have a restaurant. Yep, right in the club. It's great. I mean, it's very clean.
how do you become part of the club?
You apply. You get two people to sponsor you, and then it
That's
goes.
like referrals.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it goes before a like. Yeah, I could sponsor you. I have to get you have to get the forms, and then the form has to fill out the form. You can be an artist member, or you can be, what do they call the other one? A patron member, maybe the
Hmm.
other one is called, because you don't have to be an artist to be a member. And anyway, and then it goes before committee, and
Hmm.
every couple of months or something like that, they review, and then they post it, and then you're in.
Well, that's cool.
And you pay dues to support the club.
Yeah, exactly.
So those of us who are not within 50-mile radius, our dues are a little less than the ones who are actually in the city.
Who are hanging out there all the time.
Yes. Well, but it's a wonderful, wonderful institution. We get the
Yeah, it
opportunity
looks beautiful.
to show our work there all the time, and then they bring in exhibitions, from other places, the American Masters
Hmm.
that Tim Newton curates there every year. So it's just amazing work
It,
to see.
and
And
so
then
you're in Connecticut?
I'm in Connecticut. Yes, I'm in Trumbull, Connecticut. So I'm about an hour and a half from, realistically, on a Sunday morning. If I want to go down to the club on a Sunday morning before there's any traffic, I could be there in an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow.
Other times it could take me 3 hours.
So when you go in, you go for like the whole day then? You make.
Not always.
Oh, really? Okay.
Sometimes I'll go in for an event, for a dinner, or to see an exhibition. But
Okay.
I'll also go into the city to paint. We have a plein air group in the club, so we paint
Nice.
the city, which is fun. So yeah.
That's what Costanza does. She's like in her 80s. I love this woman. I think like I'm not sure if I believe in this or not, but if I did, we both once talked about we think we were soulmates in a different life.
There you
Um,
go.
I mean, she's 40 years older than me, but but I mean, I turned my phone on earlier to contact you, and I forgot to turn it back off.
I was going to go, what was that buzzing?
Bad phone, bad. And she was just this incredible, insightful woman. She was a lawyer and incredible painter, and I was coaching her a few years back in design, and she came to this point where she just felt like she had to stop painting for a little bit, and she was scared to say that. And I said, Costanza, sometimes you just need to, you got to follow your spirit. And at 80 some years old, she loved flamingo dancing. So she decided to take a sabbatical and go flamingo dancing. So I think she went to Spain, out to Oregon. And for about a year or so, she just was traveling around in her 80s flamingo dancing.
Wow.
And and she came back, and when she picked up a brush, it's like everything she's doing is selling now. Like,
Wow.
and she walks around, New York at nighttime with a little camera, going down, into these little places, and people look at her like, "Who's this little weird old lady?" Taking pictures at nighttime, in New York City. But that's her city, she's been there for a long, long time.
We have to feed our souls. right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So
And
I'd encourage you when you go, seek her out. She
I am
is,
going to. Is it Costanza is her first name?
yeah, Costanza. I'll send you her email. You can say hi.
Okay. Oh, I'd love
Um,
to meet her.
but she is, I would say, in the last, say, 10 years, Costanza and Bill, he just turned 72 this week. And Bill's my little Yoda. Costanza was before Bill, and it was interesting because it was with Costanza that she let the dog out, and the dog at the academy means design, and then when I met Bill, when Costanza left, Bill came into my life, and Bill was actually my first like paying student, like and um and then just been dear friends for the last 3 years, and he's kind of let the Don out, and he was actually the one who first started calling me Don Victor, and then everybody else started calling me that, and then now like people always ask me, like you asked me, is your name Don or is it Victor or is it? So some of the students, they just call me DV now, just to kind of get past the confusion of it. But you get these teachers in your life, these guides who come along and help you, and being at their age, I take it as a very big responsibility, because it's like they're investing those last precious moments that they have on earth in me. And when you get that, you
Wow.
don't take it lightly.
Yeah.
We're not 20 sitting around, philosophizing. These people are downloading decades of wisdom, and
Oh, I love that.
yeah.
I love that expression too. That they're downloading decades of wisdom. That's a cool way of putting it.
So let's leave it on that note.
In just 30 days, the Core 80 experience teaches you to decode the intentional design underneath great masterpieces. Through video lessons, assignments, and feedback, you learn to recognize the underlying structures like thrust maps, echoes, and gamuts that give master compositions substance and gravitas. Knowing how master artists and illustrators compose their artwork unlocks your ability to give your artwork more meaning and energy. Enroll today and get a 7-day no-hassle money-back guarantee at core80.com.